Since its second season, The Simpsons has offered up an annual Halloween special dubbed The Treehouse of Horror. A parody of classic anthology series, these episodes each offer up 3 short horror and sci-fi tales, many of which are some of The Simpsons' most memorable stories and moments ever. In this video, I aim to rank the top 10 Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episodes, which just so happens to be the first 10 by their stories, making for a ranking of the top 30 Simpsons Treehouse of Horror stories, which I probably could have just said from the top. Without further rambling, hold on to your broomstick, it's gonna be a spooky ride. Let's get into it. At number 30, Starship Poopers. When Maggie begins developing into a creature, Marge comes clean about her true parentage. She is the result of a crossbreeding project forced upon Marge after an alien abduction years ago. It's a pretty dark premise and definitely not something that would pass today. As it continues to spiral in its ridiculousness, it makes for a short that naturally feels awkward and unfunny. 29, Life's a Glitch, Then You Die. The Simpsons attempted to parody the Y2K Millennium Bug conspiracy theory, which sees Springfield go into meltdown when the year 2000 comes. Plenty of series at the time had a Y2K parody, which makes this one totally unoriginal. It's also incredibly dated, given that not only did Y2K not happen, but that those that weren't there probably don't even know what it's all about anyway. Unfunny gags also makes this wildly forgettable. 28, How to Pay. After Springfield criminal Snake is executed, his body is parted out on the black market, where Homer gets his hair as part of a transplant surgery. The hair comes to life, forcing Homer to kill all of those in Springfield who did Snake wrong. It's one of the more far-fetched Treehouse of Horrors, but not an overly scary or funny one, feeling like very little effort went into it. 27, Easy Bake Coven. Marge is put to the test at the Springfield witch trials and is discovered to actually be one. With her witchy sisters, Marge knocks on doors around town looking for children to eat, instead finding a love for candy. The three go on a spree scaring for candy and in the process invent Halloween. It's a decent premise, but it isn't really used to its full potential. It's also not all that frightening, funny, or memorable. 26, I Know What You Diddly Iddly Did. In a parody of I Know What You Did Last Summer, The Simpsons accidentally kill Ned Flanders and try to cover up the murder, though things aren't what they seem when Ned returns and reveals that he was a werewolf all along. It's a decent spoof of the film with a couple of chuckles, though it's spoiled by its average twist reveal. 25, Desperately Seeking Xena. In a parody of superhero adventures, specifically the Batman series of the 60s, after a malfunctioning X-ray machine gives them superpowers, Bart and Lisa become Stretch Dude and Clobber Girl, and set out to save Xena actress Lucy Lawless from the Collector. This is one I loved as a kid and still holds up fairly well, with great riffs on classic superhero tropes, though it's also one whose jokes fall fairly flat most of the time and lacks any of the spooky or scary charm of the earlier Treehouse of Horrors. 24, The Terror of Tiny Toon. Bart and Lisa are sucked into an episode of Itchy and Scratchy where the deadly duo attempts to kill them in a series of highly violent situations. While not an all-time classic, it's an incredibly fun Treehouse of Horror and perhaps one of the most inventive, that plays beautiful tribute to hyper-violent screwball classics of the Golden Age, showcasing a ton of fantastic cartoon gag moments. 23, King Homer. This is a great homage to the original King Kong film from 1933. While it works really well, I feel it doesn't hold up incredibly, perhaps having also aged more than most Treehouse of Horror tales. It puts a fun little spin on the Kong tale, but it isn't an overly exciting installment. That said, it does include one of my favourite Simpsons lines ever.
What do you think, Smithers?
I think women and semen don't mix.
22, The Bart Zone. In a Twilight Zone-inspired episode, Bart has the power to read minds and forces everyone in Springfield to think happy thoughts. There are some great moments here, particularly the Homer vs. Bart sequence, but overall it's one of the least inspired early Treehouse of Horror stories. 21, Bad Dream House. The Simpsons move into a new home only to find it's built on a Native American burial ground. A menacing voice threatens death, objects are thrown around, blood drips from the walls, and there's an extra-dimensional vortex in the kitchen. As the first Treehouse of Horror installment ever, it perfectly blends legitimately creepy horror elements with clever comedy, setting the stage for the stories to come, though not incredibly unique in itself. 20. Time and Punishment. Homer finds himself traveling back in time and while there kills a mosquito, which changes the entire fabric of his reality. In an attempt to fix his errors, Homer keeps screwing up more and more, spiraling through a series of parallel universes, each stranger than the last. While a fantastic concept and an enjoyable short, it doesn't hold many incredibly memorable moments or huge laughs. 19. Genesis Tub. Another great sci-fi Treehouse of Horror where Lisa accidentally creates a miniature civilization during a science fair project and ends up shrunken and venerated as a god. Sadly, it's one with such a huge premise that feels constricted by its 7-minute runtime and doesn't really achieve as much as it could. It seems as the seasons go on, the stories get more elaborate and could easily warrant their own 20-minute blocks. 18. Attack of the 50-foot eyesores. An ionic disturbance causes a freak storm to rip through Springfield, which brings many of the town's large advertising mascots to life in a parody of classic monster disaster films. While certainly one of the most iconic Treehouse of Horrors and featuring one of The Simpsons' most catchy tunes, it's not highly inventive past its core idea. The Homerverse Lard Lad sequence, however, is pure gold. 17. The Homega Man. A terrific parody of classic sci-fi horror The Omega Man sees Homer the last man alive after the French launch a nuclear attack on Springfield. He soon finds himself on the run from mutants who are out to eat his skin. It's a super creepy entry and one of the best Homer-centric stories, with a classic sequence that sees him causing havoc around Springfield. 16. The Thing and I. Bart discovers he has a long-lost evil twin that's been living in the Simpsons' attic for 10 years, feasting on fish heads once a week. It is one of the absolute creepiest Treehouse of Horrors, with some fantastic classic horror movie imagery, and it's probably one of the most memorable too. However, it is another that feels as if so much more could have been done with the premise. 15. Fly vs. Fly. Homer buys a transportation device and begins to overuse it in a series of increasingly hilarious situations. However, when Bart realizes the machine can also splice DNA, he jumps in with a fly in an attempt to become a Flyboy. However, it goes disastrously wrong. Again, this is another that has such a great premise, it could easily warrant its own episode. However, the short runtime does work in some great moments and memorable lines. 14. Nightmare on Evergreen Terrace. Willie takes the role of Freddy Krueger in another film parody. It's always great fun to see Willie taking the limelight, and this is one of his finest moments as he invades children's dreams to murder them. There is some terrifically funny black comedy here and an incredible Tex Avery homage, but as someone not too big on the slasher films it riffs on, I've never had a huge connection to it. Unlucky number 13. If I Only Had a Brain. Hopped up on too much candy, Homer dreams his brain is stolen to power Mr. Burns' ultimate worker robot. When it backfires and Burns is crushed by the robot, he sews his head onto Homer's body. While a fairly stock-standard tale, the ending offers one of the greatest Treehouse of Horror moments, as Homer wakes to find it wasn't a dream. The preview for next week's episode, which actually fooled me as a kid, is icing on the cake. 12. The Devil and Homer Simpson. Homer sells his soul for a donut to the devil, aka Ned Flanders. Tortured in hell by being forced to eat a lifetime supply of donuts, Homer enjoys it far too much, leading to a great Simpsons moment. When the Simpsons challenge the devil, Homer is put on trial in a wacky, gag-laden sequence. While enjoyable, it's not the best comedy or horror Treehouse of Horror has to offer. 11. Bart Simpson's Dracula. Putting a wild and zany spin on the Dracula story using iconography from Francis Ford Coppola's 1992 Dracula film, this is perhaps one of the most inventive and ingenious Treehouse of Horrors. It pays respectful homage to gothic horror while loading it with some incredible sight gags. The finale, which sees the entire Simpsons clan vampires and Marge their leader, is wonderfully madcap. 10. Clown Without Pity. Bart is given a Krusty doll as a birthday present from the House of Evil gift shop, which comes to life and attempts to murder Homer. In a series of incredibly hilarious gags, some of the absolute best from the early Simpsons, this is a wildly funny tale that blends true horror and laugh-out-loud comedy terrifically, ending on one of the Simpsons' greatest punchlines. 9. The Raven. An almost literal adaptation of Edgar Allan Poe's poem The Raven, but Simpsonized. Homer takes the role of the storyteller and Bart the pesky raven. While funny, this tale is most enjoyable thanks to its terrific animation that oozes atmospheric horror. It's more of an experimental little short and one of the most daring things The Simpsons ever did. 8. Terror at 5.5 feet. This is a magnificently memorable installment and one of the very first that comes to mind when I think Treehouse of Horror. It's got creepy, atmospheric animation, legitimately thrilling moments, and plenty of uncomfortable gag comedy. It's also a wonderfully violent short that continued to push the boundaries on the directions these shorts could go. 7. Hungry Are the Damned. The Simpsons find themselves abducted by aliens in the first appearance of Kang and Kodos, and the Treehouse of Horror's first sci-fi horror story. Though the Simpsons believe they're being prepared to be eaten, it turns out the aliens' intentions are peaceful, filled with quirky, subversive humor, plenty of memorable moments, and a wonderful self-deprecating twist. It's one of the most clever stories of all. 6. Dial Z for Zombies. In an attempt to raise their dead cat from the grave, Bart and Lisa accidentally awaken the undead as a plague of zombies terrorizes Springfield. It is a creepy story with great horror elements, but includes some fantastic one-liners and sight gags, making for a wonderfully enjoyable tale. 5. The Monkey's Paw. Homer buys an enchanted monkey paw that grants wishes, but with great misfortune. Though the Simpsons' wishes are monotonous, they attract fame and fortune, leading to public backlash, a terrific commentary on the Simpsons' early 90s fame. The Earth is soon invaded by aliens in a hilariously wacky sequence, and Flanders saves the day, leading to Homer's greatest misfortune. This clever short further pushed the boundaries of Treehouse of Horror, not only playing with horror elements, but quirky ideas and self-referential gags. 4. Citizen Kang. One of the few Treehouse of Horrors that were used as social commentary, this one sees Kang and Kodos in easily their best appearance, imprisoning then President Bill Clinton and opposition leader Bob Dole, stealing their personalities and using the upcoming election as a platform to enslave the world, which they eventually do. Not only is this a wildly hilarious and meta Treehouse of Horror, but includes some of the most quoted moments in Simpsons history. 3. Nightmare Cafeteria. In the most legitimately disturbing Treehouse of Horror, the teachers of Springfield Elementary begin serving murdered children as meats in the cafeteria. It's the first time Simpsons really played around with black comedy on this level, and it's confronting and wickedly funny. It ends with Bart waking from a dream to discover a fog has swept through Springfield, turning everyone inside out, leaving us on one of the series' most grisly images. 2. Homer Cubed. Perhaps a little dated now, this was one of the greatest episodes to catch on TV as a kid, when 3D animation was still a novelty, first debuting a month before Toy Story hit theaters. The pure novelty of seeing Homer stepping into the third dimension and then into the real world still gets me today. It's full of great laughs and is still one of the Simpsons' most ambitious cartoons ever. And coming in as the #1 Treehouse of Horror story, The Shining. Probably The Simpsons' greatest ever spoof. This takeoff of The Shining encapsulates everything so great about the show in the mid-90s. Great pop culture references, incredible character moments, and memorable one-liners. As a lover of this one a decade before I even saw The Shining, now one of my favourites, it's not only a standout Treehouse of Horror, but a standout Simpsons story, period. And at that, I'm throwing it over to you. I want to know, what are your personal favourite Treehouse of Horror stories or episodes? Fire away down in the pits of hell that are the comments below and let me know your thoughts. Hey everyone, if you haven't yet, smash that big old subscribe button up on your screen to keep up to date with all my content, and hit that like button down below. Also, don't forget to check me out on social media, and please consider supporting me over on Patreon for as little as $1 a month for exclusive videos, early access content, and to get your name up on the screen. Thanks again for watching.